In this episode, we're going to be answering the age-old question of, is it all right for a Christian to read personal development books? You've got a dream to glorify God and make your mark on the world. Maybe you want to grow a business, start a ministry, or become a better servant leader. Whichever level in life you want to hit, I believe that God's calling all of us towards something greater than where we are now. So join me as I document my journey to learn how to grow an online ministry in ways that are effective, biblical, and aren't stuffed with complicated religious or business mumbo-jumbo. My name is Alec Kassan, and welcome to the Digital Ministry Mastermind Podcast. Hey, what is going on, current Christian family? It is Alec here, and this is a little bit of an impromptu episode because my wife and I just had a very interesting, very in-depth conversation in the car just a moment ago. Literally, like I just got into the apartment and I was like, babe, I'm going to go record an episode real quick. She's like, okay. She's making her smoothie right now after that gym workout. And so she was like, you read a decent amount of like these different like mindset books, personal development books, and like as a Christian, like how do you feel about that? Like, do you feel like it's been helping you, or just like what are your thoughts on it? And that reminded me of that question that people ask a lot. Like, as a Christian, is it okay to read personal development books? And sure, there are personal development books that are out there written by Christian authors, and I definitely recommend, as a Christian, certainly dive into those books because it'll have a little bit more of a foundation that's like rooted in the Bible and in Jesus's teachings. But it doesn't necessarily mean that other books that aren't foundationally Christian aren't going to be good for you. Like in the Bible, like the book of Proverbs, book of Ecclesiastes, these are probably two of the oldest personal development books that there are out there. So just in that realm, in that aspect of things, like personal development in general, like it is in the Bible, seen in the book of Proverbs, and then also in all of the New Testament letters as well. These are like little bite-sized bits of like kind of personal development stuff going on there. So in that aspect, personal development books and literature in general, no. But then in the deeper question of like, well, what if it's a book not written by a Christian? And this one is like the answer isn't as cut and dry, because as it says in the Bible, like you as a Christian, like Paul was writing to a bunch of churches, and forgive me for, I don't know exactly which church he was writing to, but Paul was writing to a bunch of Christians and a specific church who deep down in their hearts, they knew they were saved by Christ. And they knew that if they were to eat foods that were sacrificed in the name of another god, they're like, I don't really care. These other gods don't exist. It's just food. I'm gonna eat it. But then there were these other Christians who were like, no, that's really bad. Like that animal, that food that you're eating was devoted to another god. Don't even go near that food. So there was a little bit of conflict there in that church. And basically what Paul said was like, hey, like if you're around other people who are feeling very convicted that you shouldn't eat those meats, then don't eat those meats around them. But if you're in the comfort of your own home, and it really the way he saw it as well is like, it shouldn't necessarily hurt your faith if you don't allow it to. And if you're around people where it will shake up their faith, then don't do it around them, and don't do it. But if you're in the comfort of your own home and you're firm in your faith and you know that that's not going to disrupt you, then by all means, like you can eat that meat. So this comes like, this answer, like as you can see where it's going to be alluded to, it takes a little bit of a discernment on your own part. Like I've read books, personal development books, that did have things in it that were conflicting with, at least some of the teachings were conflicting with some of the teachings that Jesus said. And I'm able to discern that. I was able to read that and be like, that's not right. Ignore, cut that out. Because in light of the Bible, I was like, that's not true. And I wish I had an example of something for that. Oh, like here's one, for example, where it's like, your destiny is determined by you and your decisions. And it's like, in some aspects, yes, other aspects, no. And the no comes from Jonah and the fish, the Jonah made every decision. He wanted to determine his own destiny so badly. And, God worked it all out to work in a way that God intended. So in a sense, no, like, Jonah wasn't able to decide that. But then there's other instances in the Bible as well, where you got David who like decided to sleep with another man's wife, commit murder, and as a result, like I don't think God intended for David to do that, but God allowed that to work out in his plan. So it was like that right there is an example of something that I had read in a personal development book, but through my own, through the wisdom of the Bible that I had known, I was like, okay, that's not necessarily true. And for some Christians, they may not have that capability. So what I'm trying to get at there is, if you feel bad for eating that meat, do not eat that meat. But a thing that's really, really cool is what most good personal development, what most good mindset books will do is just help you see a more accurate picture of reality. And what I mean by that is, for example, I had read this book called The Obstacle is the Way. It is a fantastic book. I really enjoyed it because in our society, especially here in America, you got this whole lovey-dovey thing where like at the end of the romantic comedy movie, it's like, oh yeah, despite this man and woman having so many conflicts in the relationship, and there's all these funny moments, there's all these tense moments, and there's all that heartbreak, at the end, they came together happily ever after. And it's like, hold up, nah, the movie just ended on a good note. But if you were to watch those people's lives moving forward, like based on everything we saw, there's just going to be more of that moving forward. But the movie doesn't show that because the movie has to end. But in reality, those people's lives wouldn't end. So we have these false expectations in our mind that are given to us by a lot of stuff in the media about like, oh, you overcome a challenge, happily ever after. And it's like, I'm sorry, but no, that's not how it goes. At the end of that challenge, there's always going to be something more challenging happening. I'm not trying to be like pessimistic here. It's just reality. And in that book, The Obstacle is the Way, it shows that like if you are trying to go down a certain path and there's an obstacle on that path, that doesn't inherently mean you're on the wrong path. The obstacle is now part of that path, and getting around it, getting through it, over it, whatever, that is now part of your journey. Hence the name of the book, The Obstacle is the Way. The obstacle becomes the way. And that book did one of those things that I was just talking about, as in terms of how it helps you have a better expectations, more realistic expectations. And that is like the foundation of like prove me wrong. You can't do it. Every story in the Bible is all about setting proper expectations of what's real in the universe that God has placed us in. Every single story, it's all about revealing and setting realistic expectations of what God's character is, how things work in the world. Like, of course, there's miracles and things like that. Not every day that an axe is just floating in water, but it's all meant to reveal what God's character is. And again, good personal development, good mindset books are going to do that. They're going to help you see and have a more realistic understanding of what reality is. So if you're reading a book and it's going to tell you like, if you just think really, really hard about it, it'll happen. It's like, I'm sorry, no, that's not necessarily how that works. I can't look at a weed and think really hard that it's going to go away and it goes away. It's like, that's not realistic. And the Bible does that too. It's like all these different stories are addressing stories from other people's cultures. Like I'm sure you've heard about how all the different plagues that God had sent with Moses in Egypt, all those plagues were acknowledging and basically picking fun of these different gods that the Egyptians at the time put their faith in. And even in the book of Genesis, like the whole Genesis story is a narrative that's basically challenging. I believe it was the Babylonians' view of how the world started and what God's character was like. Like every single story, like that's what it's doing. It's challenging people's expectations and presenting them more realistic expectations. So if you're able to read a mindset book, personal development book that gives you those better expectations, those more realistic expectations, then honestly, there's really nothing wrong with that. However, going back to the whole thing of Paul saying the stuff of, if the meat causes you to sin by eating it, don't eat it, then, you got to take that into account as well. Because like for example, if someone were to ask me, Alec, is it bad? Is it wrong to drink a beer? It's like, that's a loaded question. Who's asking me? Is it a 12-year-old? I'm going to say, no, boy, don't drink a beer. Or is it a recovering alcoholic? I'd be like, no, don't. I don't care if it's a sip. Don't do that. It's very much dependent on the individual. And I find that like the more rooted you are in your faith, the more you're able to discern what things in these different books are truth and what's not true. And this is not, and I'm not saying that to come at anyone's character, saying like, oh, you're an immature Christian because you can't read these other books. By all means, I am not saying that at all. Like, trust me, what I'm really more alluding to is like, I had heard this story about these people in the National Treasure. I don't know if that in the National Treasury, I think that is, but basically the branch of the government that monitors finances and stuff of like printing $100 bills, things like that. And there are these agents who were given the task of being able to discern which $100 bills are fake $100 bills. You know, they have to come up with these strategies for being able to discern, like, is this a real $100 bill or a fake one? And what they do to train these agents is they're not giving them fake bills and pointing out how these fake ones look different than the real ones. What they do is they give them like crisp, clean, like authentic $100 bills. They're like, study this forward and backwards, inside and out. Like, you have to be able to like imagine, like picture what this looks like with your eyes closed. Like, they study the real thing so hard that when they're presented a fake, it's just instinct. They're like, this is fake. This is not the real thing. And they don't get to that level of discernment by continually trying to study these other things that aren't the real thing. No, the way that they get there is by continually studying the real thing. So if you're on the fence about like reading these other like books that may not be inherently Christian and stuff like that, like, you cannot go wrong by going deep and diving deep into just reading the Bible as it is. And if you really, really, really want just like that personal development feel type of stuff, you could dive right into Proverbs, dive right into Ecclesiastes, and then just dig deep into all of the letters in the New Testament. Like, that is a fantastic place to start right there. So yeah, anyway, this was a little bit of an impromptu episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. I also hope you feel a little bit encouraged if you felt embarrassed about like reading different personal development books. It's like, it's totally fine. Like, be well cultured. You know, Jesus was totally aware of Roman rule and things like that, as well as Paul. Paul knew the Roman government law and belief systems inside and out, and that actually helped benefit him to spread the gospel even more. So don't feel guilty for reading personal development stuff, but, you know, don't be spending your time studying fake dollar bills when you got the real thing right in front of you. So, hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And if you found that this episode was insightful or helpful in any way, and you want to share it with a family member, church family member, friends, whatever, then please, I invite you to do so. And hey, remember that God is calling all of us towards something greater than where we are now. All right, have a blessed one. Are you a Christian leader looking to develop the skills needed to maximize the fruitfulness in your daily walk with Christ? Do you want to overcome the burden of not living life to the fullest and fully step into your God-given calling? If you do, then you should get a copy of my book, Planting Your Purpose, a 20-day guide to discover God's calling. It's not just another devotional book. Planting Your Purpose is your 20-day guide that will provide you with the strategies, tools, and insights to turn things around immediately. You will learn how to avoid the top 5 mistakes Christians make when pursuing their calling in life. You'll develop more joy in your walk with Jesus and unlock the secrets to mastering integrity. And by the end of 20 days, not only will you know your calling, but you'll have an even greater sense of fulfillment and confidence in your life. Everywhere, Christians are raving about this amazing new guide to discover their God-given calling. Get your copy by clicking the link in the show notes or by going to plantingyourpurpose.com. That's plantingyourpurpose.com.